What is going on here?
We were just talking. We were just talking.
The gentle hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the kitchen as I stared at the small screen of our new smart display. My husband Mark had insisted we get it, a little piece of the future to make our lives easier. He'd said it was mostly for Mom, so she could listen to her classical music or call for help if she fell. My 70-year-old mother, Eleanor, had been living with us for the past year, ever since her health had taken a turn. At first, I had been worried about the strain, but Mark had been a saint, a rock. He'd taken to her care with a gentle patience that made my heart ache with love. He and Mom would spend hours in the living room, chatting softly while I made dinner, their voices a comforting murmur in the background. I thought it was bonding. I thought it was beautiful. Now, I saw it for what it was. I had been trying to find a new recipe for pot roast, and I'd accidentally swiped to the device's activity history. And there it was. A recording, just 3 minutes long, from an hour ago. Triggered by a command I didn't recognize. My finger trembled as I pressed play. The sound was crystal clear. It was Mark and my mother, their voices low and conspiratorial. Is she still convinced the power of attorney is just for your medical bills, Eleanor? Mark's voice, the same one that whispered words of love to me at night, was stripped of all warmth. It was cold, sharp, and businesslike. Oh, absolutely, my mother's voice chirped, but her tone was different too, not the frail, slightly confused woman she pretended to be. It was sharp, cunning, and filled with a chilling amusement. She's so desperate to be a good daughter, she'd sign her own death warrant if I told her it would make me comfortable. She still feels guilty about her father, you know, thinks she didn't do enough. My father, the thought of him was a fresh stab of pain. He'd died 2 years ago, leaving me a modest but significant inheritance, money I had told Mark we would use to secure our future, to ensure Mom had the best care possible. The final transfer from her inheritance account should clear by Friday, Mark continued. Once that's done, and we have the appraisal on the house, we can move forward with the next step. The competency hearing? My mother asked, and I could hear the eagerness in her voice. Exactly. With her history of anxiety and that little breakdown she had after her father passed, it won't be hard for my lawyer to paint a picture. A few more weeks of me telling her she's forgetting things, that she's overreacting, and the judge will see she's incapable of managing her own affairs. We'll be her legal guardians, in total control. For her own good, of course. They both chuckled. A dry, horrible sound that echoed in the silent kitchen and shattered my world into a million pieces. The screen went dark, the recording over. I stood there, frozen, the phone still in my hand. My breath was trapped in my chest, a painful, crushing weight. They weren't just chatting, they were plotting. They were systematically dismantling my life, my finances, my sanity, all while I smiled and thanked them for their care, for their love. Mark thought I was a fragile, anxious mess. My mother thought I was a weak, guilt-ridden fool. They thought they had me perfectly under their control. And as the initial shock gave way to a wave of icy cold rage, I made a silent promise to the woman reflected in the dark screen of that smart display. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. My mind reeled back, sifting through the past year with a sickening new clarity. 3 months earlier, I was standing in this very kitchen, beaming with gratitude as Mark adjusted the new ergonomic walker he had bought for Mom. It's nothing, honey, he'd said, kissing my forehead. Eleanor is family, anything to make her more comfortable. I had watched him help her take a few tentative steps, his arm securely around her waist, her hand clutching his for support. He'd looked at me over her shoulder and mouthed, "I love you." I had felt like the luckiest woman in the world, blessed with a husband so kind he treated my aging mother like his own. Eleanor had moved in after a bad fall, and the doctor had warned that her memory was starting to show signs of slipping. She seemed so vulnerable, so dependent. She'd cry softly at night sometimes, and Mark would be the one to go to her, sitting by her bed and holding her hand until she fell back asleep. "You get your rest, Clara," he would tell me. "You have enough on your plate. Let me handle this." I had let him. I had sunk into his care, his strength, like a warm blanket. My own anxiety, a lifelong companion since my teenage years, had quieted in the face of his competence. He handled the bills, the appointments, the logistics. He and Mom would have long, quiet talks that I assumed were about her health, her memories, her fears. I never intruded. I felt it was their special time, a bond I was happy to foster. I should have seen the small signs, the little inconsistencies that my trusting heart had refused to acknowledge. There was the time I walked in on them, and they fell silent, Mark quickly changing the subject to the weather. He'd laughed it off when I asked. Your mom was just telling me an old story she didn't want you to hear, embarrassed about her wild youth, he'd said, and I'd laughed with him. Then there was the way Mom's memory lapses were so selective. She could never remember where she put her glasses or if she'd taken her morning pills, but she could recall with perfect, damning accuracy every time I'd ever disappointed her. You were always such a sensitive child, Clara, she'd sigh, patting my hand. So prone to hysterics. Just like your father, God rest his soul. He worried so much about you. Every word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall of self-doubt around me. I was the emotional one, the fragile one, the one who needed to be managed. Mark played his part perfectly, always defending me on the surface. Now, Eleanor, Clara's just got a big heart. That's why we love her. But his defense was always followed by a quiet conversation with me later. Honey, you know your mom doesn't mean it. She's just old and her filter is gone. Maybe try not to react so strongly. It just upsets her. So I learned to swallow my feelings, to push down the hurt, to smile and nod and be the calm, capable woman they needed me to be, all while feeling my own confidence erode day by day. They were a team, a masterful pair of actors, and I was their sole audience, applauding their performance while they picked my pockets and poisoned my mind. The first major step in their plan had been so cleverly disguised as love and concern. Mark had sat me down at the kitchen table one evening, his face a mask of gentle worry. Clara, honey, I was talking with Eleanor's doctor, and we need to think about the future. With her memory issues, it's only a matter of time before she can't handle her own finances or make medical decisions. I'd nodded, my stomach twisting with a familiar dread for my mother's decline. I've been thinking about that too, I'd whispered. That's why I wanted to talk to you about a power of attorney, he'd said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. It would allow us to manage her accounts and speak on her behalf if she becomes incapacitated. It's the responsible thing to do. He had explained it all so clearly, so patiently. But then he'd added one more thing. And while we're at it, our lawyer suggested we get our own affairs in order too. You know, just in case. We'll set up a joint power of attorney for each other. That way, if anything ever happens to you, I can step in and take care of everything without any legal hurdles. It just streamlines the process. It had made perfect sense. I was so focused on my mother's well-being that I hadn't thought twice about signing the documents for myself. I saw it as an act of mutual trust, a testament to our partnership. He had pointed to the signature line, his finger tracing the blank space. Right here, honey. I had signed it without reading all the fine print, because why would I need to? This was Mark, the man who held me when I cried, who told me I was strong when I felt weak, who was my partner in all things. The memory now made me feel physically ill. I hadn't just signed a standard power of attorney. I remembered a specific clause he'd glossed over, something about in the event of certified incapacitation. I had given him the legal key to my entire life, and he was now meticulously building the case to turn that key. He wasn't just my husband, he was my architect of ruin. He was building my prison, and he had convinced me to hand him the bricks and mortar, one signature at a time. The warning signs grew more frequent after that. Small tremors before the earthquake. I started noticing Mark on his laptop late at night. When I asked what he was doing, he'd snap it shut. Just work stuff, honey. Boring contracts. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. The condescending phrase, once a term of endearment, now felt like a verbal pat on the head to a child. I started seeing mail from financial institutions I didn't recognize, addressed to him. He would intercept the mail carrier, taking the letters before I could see them. More junk mail, he'd say, tossing them into his briefcase. My mother's role became more pronounced, too. She began a subtle but relentless campaign to undermine my memory and confidence in front of others. When we had friends over for dinner, she would say things like, "Oh, Clara, you've told that story 3 times already tonight, dear. Are you feeling all right?" I would flush with embarrassment, certain I hadn't, but her concerned tone and Mark's sympathetic glance would make me doubt myself. He was gaslighting me, and he was using my own mother as the fuel for the fire. The true catalyst, the moment the ground truly split open beneath my feet, was the installation of the smart home system. Mark had presented it as a birthday gift to me. "This will make your life so much easier, Clara. You can control the lights, the music, everything with your voice. And it has that drop-in feature, so we can check on Eleanor without having to run upstairs every 5 minutes." It was framed as a gift of convenience and care. I now see it was a tool of surveillance and control. A few weeks after it was installed, I was in the kitchen preparing for my mother's upcoming 70th birthday party. I had thrown myself into the planning, determined to give her a wonderful day, to prove I was the good, loving daughter she always claimed to want. I was trying to find a classical music station for her, fumbling with the voice commands. "Alexa, play Beethoven," I'd said, and the device had responded, "I'm sorry, I can't find a device named Beethoven. Did you mean play recording from Mark's study?" Confused, I said, "Yes?" And that's when I heard it. Not the full, damning conversation I would discover later, but a snippet. Just Mark's voice, cold and clinical. "The final documents from the neuropsychologist will confirm the cognitive decline. That, combined with your testimony about her emotional instability, should be enough." The recording cut off. I stood there, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Neuropsychologist? Emotional instability? I had seen a therapist for my anxiety for years, but Mark had recently insisted I see a new specialist he had found, a Dr. Albright. He said this doctor was the best, specializing in cognitive behavioral therapy that could really help. I'd had 2 sessions with him. He'd asked me a series of strange memory-based questions and had me fill out long questionnaires about my moods and emotional state. I thought it was standard procedure. I now realized Dr. Albright wasn't a therapist. He was a hired gun, and I was the target. The realization was a physical blow. I stumbled back against the counter, gasping for air. This wasn't just about money. This was a calculated, insidious plot to have me declared mentally incompetent, to strip me of my autonomy, my child, my life. They weren't just planning to leave me with nothing, they were planning to erase me entirely, leaving behind the hollowed-out shell of a woman they had created, a woman legally too unstable to exist on her own. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave of betrayal that threatened to drown me. I curled up on the cold kitchen floor, the sobs racking my body, mourning the loss of the man I loved and the mother I thought I knew. I cried for the fool I had been, for the trust I had so freely given. I cried until there were no tears left, until all that remained was the hollow ache of absolute loss. And then, something else began to bubble up from that empty space. It was a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to experience in years, a feeling I had been taught was unladylike, hysterical, and wrong. It was rage, a pure, cold, clarifying rage. It burned away the grief and the guilt and the self-doubt, leaving behind a diamond-hard certainty. I was not weak, I was not hysterical, and I was not going to be erased. I stood up on shaky legs and looked at the smart display, the Trojan horse Mark had so smugly brought into our home. He thought he was so clever. Both of them did. They had underestimated me my entire life. They saw me as a pawn in their game. But a pawn that reaches the other side of the board, I thought with a grim smile, can become a queen. And this queen was about to start a war. My first move was to become the woman they believed me to be. I leaned into the role of the fragile, anxious Clara with an actress's dedication. The next morning, I made a point of looking puffy-eyed and distraught at breakfast. When Mark asked what was wrong, I crumpled. "It's Mom," I whispered, forcing a tear to roll down my cheek. I had a nightmare that she fell again and I couldn't help her. "I just feel so overwhelmed, Mark. I don't think I'm strong enough to handle all of this." He fell for it completely. He wrapped his arms around me, his touch now feeling like a spider's crawl on my skin. "Shh, honey, it's okay. I'm here. I'll take care of everything. You just focus on being you. I'll handle the heavy lifting." The condescension was so thick I could have choked on it, but I just nodded meekly into his chest, playing my part. While he was at work, my real work began. I started with the mail. Knowing he was intercepting it, I began walking to the end of the driveway every morning before he was awake, checking the box myself. It took 3 days, but I finally found what I was looking for. A statement from a bank I didn't recognize, addressed to him and my mother, a joint account. I carefully opened it with a steam kettle, photographed the contents with my phone, and resealed it. It showed an initial deposit of $50,000, transferred from an account I now realized was my inheritance fund. The date was just 2 days after I had signed the power of attorney. Next, I went into his home office, a room I rarely entered. He kept his files locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key, in the hollowed-out book on his shelf ironically titled Secrets of Success. Inside the filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Eleanor Estate. It was filled not just with my mother's documents, but with my own. There were copies of my therapy records, which he must have obtained illegally. There was a file on Dr. Albright, including invoices for neuropsychological evaluation services. And there was a draft of a legal petition for guardianship, detailing my long history of emotional volatility and recent cognitive decline. It was a pre-written narrative of my own insanity. I photographed every single page, my hands shaking not with fear, but with a cold fury. That afternoon, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not a local one, but a bulldog of a woman 2 towns over, a specialist in financial fraud and elder abuse. Her name was Brenda Stone, and when I laid out my evidence on her conference table, her expression went from professional sympathy to a predatory grin. "Mr. Husband and Mrs. Mother have been very, very naughty," she said, her eyes gleaming. "This isn't just grounds for divorce, Ms. Davies. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. This is criminal. We can burn them to the ground." We spent 2 hours mapping out a strategy. The first step was to continue gathering evidence while Brenda's team prepared the legal assault. She advised me to get a private investigator. "He thinks you're falling apart," she said. "Let him think that. The more comfortable he gets, the sloppier he'll be." The private investigator, a former cop named Frank, was a gruff man with surprisingly kind eyes. He took one look at my file and nodded. Classic predator playbook. Isolate the target, undermine their confidence, then take everything. I'll get you what you need. Frank started by putting a GPS tracker on Mark's car and running a background check on Dr. Albright. The results were immediate and damning. Dr. Albright had 2 previous malpractice suits against him for providing false diagnoses to aid in legal disputes. He was a hired gun for shady lawyers. Mark wasn't just going to a doctor, he was building a fraudulent medical case. Meanwhile, I played my part at home. I became more forgetful, more weepy. I would misplace my keys and then have a small, tearful breakdown until Mark found them exactly where I had left them. I would accidentally burn dinner and apologize profusely, reinforcing his narrative that I was becoming incompetent. It was the hardest acting job of my life. Every smile felt like a lie, every touch a betrayal. But with every piece of evidence I gathered, my resolve hardened. I was no longer Clara, the fragile wife. I was a general waging a secret war from inside enemy territory. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. The next piece of the puzzle fell into place thanks to Frank, the private investigator. He had been tailing Mark for a week, and the GPS data showed a disturbing pattern. Twice a week, Mark wasn't at his late night at the office. He was visiting a small, nondescript office building downtown. The same building that housed the law firm handling his fraudulent guardianship petition. But he wasn't going to the lawyer's office. He was going to a different suite on the 3rd floor, one registered to a financial advisory firm. Frank got photos. It was Mark and my mother, Eleanor, sitting with a man in an expensive suit, smiling and shaking hands over a stack of documents. "He's not just stealing your money," Frank told me over the phone. "He's investing it, under their joint names. He's building a new life with your mother, using your father's legacy as the foundation." The audacity of it was breathtaking. They weren't just taking my money to spend it. They were growing it, planning a future of wealth and comfort for themselves while I was destined for a state-run facility, stripped of everything. I had to set the trap. The perfect opportunity was already on the calendar, my mother's 70th birthday. I had been planning a small family dinner, but now I changed course. I announced my new plan to Mark one evening, my voice filled with forced, cheerful enthusiasm. Honey, I've been thinking. A small dinner isn't enough for Mom's 70th. This is a milestone. I want to throw her a real party, a big one. Invite all her old friends, our family, everyone. I want to celebrate her. Mark's eyes lit up. I could see the calculations flashing behind them. A public party? It was the perfect cover. It would cement their image as a loving, caring family. It would showcase me as the devoted daughter, further validating their narrative should anyone question the guardianship petition later. It was too perfect for them to resist. Clara, that's a wonderful idea, he said, hugging me tightly. What a thoughtful, loving daughter you are. Of course, we'll do it. Anything for Eleanor. My mother was equally thrilled. When I told her, she clasped her hands together in delight. Oh, Clara, you've always had such a good heart, even if you are a bit of a mess sometimes. The backhanded compliment slid right off me. I just smiled. I've already booked the back room at the Chestnut Grill for next Saturday. I'm sending out digital invitations tomorrow. What I didn't tell them was that I had also hired a professional audio, visual company. I told the restaurant it was for a surprise slideshow of my mother's life. The AV technician, a young man named Leo, was more than happy to help set up a large projection screen and a high-quality sound system. He also, at my quiet request and for a significant cash bonus, agreed to link the system directly to my personal laptop, which I would control from my seat. The week leading up to the party was a masterclass in deception. I ran errands, finalized the guest list, and discussed the menu with Mark and my mother, all while secretly meeting with Brenda and Frank to finalize our attack. Brenda had prepared an emergency injunction to freeze all their known assets, including the secret joint account. It was ready to be filed the moment I gave the word. Frank had compiled a devastatingly thorough report, complete with photographs, financial records, and sworn affidavits from Dr. Albright's former victims. The night before the party, Mark found me in the living room, staring into the fireplace. "You seem quiet tonight," he said, sitting beside me. "Just nervous about tomorrow," I said, which was true, but not for the reason he thought. "I want everything to be perfect for Mom." He put his arm around me. "It will be perfect, because you're doing it. You've handled everything so well. I'm proud of you, Clara. You're getting stronger." The irony was so thick, it was almost poetic. "I had a good teacher," I said, looking him directly in the eye. He thought I meant him, the man who had so patiently managed me. He smiled, smug and self-satisfied. He had no idea that the woman sitting next to him was a stranger, a predator patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He thought I was getting stronger for him, but I was getting stronger for me. Tomorrow, he would learn the difference. The party was in full swing. The back room of the Chestnut Grill was filled with laughter and conversation. About 50 people had come to celebrate my mother's milestone birthday. Old friends from her bridge club, distant cousins, our neighbors, they were all there, sipping wine and nibbling on hors d'oeuvres. My mother, Eleanor, was holding court at the center table, resplendent in a new lavender dress Mark had bought her. She looked radiant, accepting compliments and gifts with a graciousness that was utterly fraudulent. Mark was the perfect host, moving through the crowd with a drink in his hand, his arm occasionally resting on my shoulder in a gesture of proprietary affection. "My wife, Clara, planned this whole thing," he announced to a group of my mother's friends. "Isn't she amazing?" They all smiled at me, their eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and pity. Poor, fragile Clara, who had been through so much, still managing to be such a devoted daughter. I smiled back, a serene, placid smile that revealed none of the turmoil raging within me. I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching a movie of my life. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. I had Leo, the AV tech, give me a subtle thumbs up from the corner of the room. Everything was ready. At 8 o'clock, Mark tapped a glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. "If I could have your attention, everyone. As the man of the house," he began with a smug chuckle, "I'd like to say a few words about our guest of honor. Eleanor, you came into our home under difficult circumstances, and you have filled it with grace and wisdom. It has been my absolute honor to care for you and to support my wonderful wife, Clara, as she has cared for you as well." "To Eleanor!" Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, a perfect imitation of a woman overcome with emotion. Then, Mark turned to me. And now, I believe Clara has a little surprise for her mother. This was it. I stood up, my laptop clutched in my hand. I walked to the small lectern at the front of the room, my heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. Every eye was on me. I could feel Mark's proud gaze, my mother's expectant smile. They thought they knew what was coming. A sentimental slideshow, tearful memories, a public declaration of my love and devotion. I took a deep breath and smiled at the crowd. Thank you, Mark. And thank you all for coming to celebrate my mother's 70th birthday. It truly means the world to us. I looked directly at my mother. Mom, you have taught me so much over the years. You taught me about resilience. You taught me about family. But most importantly, you taught me that things are not always what they seem. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Mark's smile tightened just a fraction. I continued, my voice steady and clear. You see, for the past year, I thought I was living one story. A story about a loving daughter caring for her ailing mother with the help of her devoted husband. But recently, I discovered I was living a different story entirely. I clicked a button on my laptop. The large screen behind me, which everyone expected to show a picture of a baby Eleanor, instead lit up with a crystal-clear image of the joint bank account statement, the one with both her and Mark's names on it. Gasps rippled through the room. This story, I said, my voice rising with power, is about a mother and a son-in-law who conspired to steal that daughter's inheritance. An inheritance left to her by her father. I clicked again. A photo of Mark and my mother at the financial advisor's office appeared on the screen, shaking hands, beaming. My mother's face had gone ashen. Mark was on his feet, his face a thunderous mask of rage. Clara, what the hell is this? Stop this right now. Oh, I'm just getting started, I said, turning back to the audience. This story is also about a husband who, under the guise of love and concern, systematically gaslit his wife, trying to convince her and the world that she was mentally incompetent. Click. An image of the drafted guardianship petition, with phrases like emotional volatility and cognitive decline highlighted in red, filled the screen. People were murmuring now, turning to stare at Mark and my mother with dawning horror. He even hired a discredited doctor to build a fraudulent medical case against me, I said, my voice ringing with cold fury. Click. Dr. Albright's photo appeared, next to screenshots of the malpractice suits filed against him. But a story like this wouldn't be complete without a motive, would it? Why go to all this trouble? Well, I paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a heart-stopping moment. Then, I pressed the final button. It wasn't an image that appeared, but audio. The crystal-clear recording from our smart display filled the room. Mark's voice, my mother's voice. Their entire venomous plan laid bare for everyone to hear. The talk of my guilt, the plan to have me declared incompetent, their laughter. The sound of their betrayal echoed off the walls of the silent, horrified room. The chaos that erupted was instantaneous. People were shouting. My mother's friends were staring at her with looks of utter disgust. Mark lunged toward the lectern, trying to get to my laptop, but Frank, my private investigator, who had been posing as a guest, stepped in his path, blocking him effortlessly. My mother, Eleanor, simply sat there, her face a grotesque mask of shock and exposure, her lavender dress suddenly looking cheap and garish. I looked at her, at the woman who had given birth to me and then tried to destroy me, and I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness. Just the clean, cold satisfaction of justice served. I leaned into the microphone one last time. So, happy birthday, Mom, I said, my voice dripping with ice. You wanted to take everything from me. Instead, I'm giving you a gift you'll never forget, the truth. At that exact moment, 2 uniformed police officers, arranged by Brenda to arrive at 8:15 sharp, walked into the room. They moved calmly through the pandemonium and approached our table. Mark Davies? Eleanor Vance? One of the officers said, his voice cutting through the noise. You're both under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit fraud. As they were handcuffed and read their rights in front of everyone they had ever known, my mother finally broke. She let out a guttural sob, a sound of pure, animal despair. Mark just stared at me, his eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. He had finally stopped underestimating me. But it was far, far too late. The year that followed was a blur of legal proceedings and personal reinvention. The story of the birthday party takedown became a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered about at other restaurants and family gatherings. Mark and my mother, faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence I had gathered, had no choice but to plead guilty. Mark was sentenced to 4 years in a medium-security prison for fraud and conspiracy. Dr. Albright lost his medical license and faced his own set of criminal charges. My mother, given her age, received a lighter sentence: 18 months of house arrest and 5 years of probation. The restraining order I filed against both of them was granted without question. The financial recovery was complex, but Brenda Stone was a shark. She clawed back almost every dollar they had stolen. The house was sold, and with the proceeds and the restored inheritance from my father, I found myself financially independent for the first time in my life. But the real work was internal. I continued therapy, but with a new therapist, one I had found myself. We worked through the years of emotional abuse and gaslighting, untangling the knots of self-doubt my mother and Mark had so carefully tied. I learned to trust my own instincts, to validate my own feelings. I learned that my sensitivity wasn't a weakness. It was a strength they had tried to turn against me. I bought a small, charming condo in a new neighborhood, a place that was entirely my own. It had big windows that let in the morning light, and a small balcony where I grew pots of lavender and rosemary. I painted the walls a cheerful yellow and filled the space with books and art and music that I loved. It was a home built not on lies, but on my own hard-won truth. My relationship with my son, Leo, who was now a teenager, blossomed in our new, peaceful environment. Once the shock of his father's and grandmother's betrayal wore off, he became my biggest supporter. "I always knew something was weird, Mom," he admitted one night. "Grandma was always so nice to Dad and so mean to you. I just didn't know what it was." Seeing me strong, happy, and in control of my own life was the best thing I could have ever done for him. He saw firsthand that you do not have to be a victim, that you can fight back, and that you can win. He was proud of me, and in turn, I was able to be the present, confident mother he truly deserved. 3 years after that fateful birthday party, my life is unrecognizable, in the best possible way. I went back to school and finished the degree in landscape design I had abandoned when I married Mark. I now run my own small but successful business, creating beautiful gardens for people. There is a deep, satisfying irony in spending my days cultivating beauty and growth after spending so many years in a landscape of toxicity and decay. Mark was released from prison 6 months ago. According to the terms of his parole and our divorce decree, he is not allowed within 500 yards of me or my son. I heard through the grapevine that he's working a manual labor job in another state, a shadow of the smug, confident man he used to be. My mother completed her house arrest. She lives in a small, government-subsidized apartment for seniors. Her old friends want nothing to do with her. The family avoids her. Her name is synonymous with shame. She has written me several letters, filled with justifications and blame, but never a true apology. I have never written back. Forgiveness might be for the divine, but for me, consequences are a more earthly form of justice. Sometimes, I think about that woman cowering in the kitchen, her world shattered by a 3-minute recording. I feel a sense of compassion for her pain and her fear. But I am not her anymore. The fire that was lit in that moment didn't consume me. It forged me into someone new, someone stronger, someone who understands that the ultimate revenge is not a single, dramatic act of destruction, but the quiet, daily, unshakable act of living well. They tried to write a story in which I was the tragic, forgotten footnote. Instead, I became the author of my own tale, and it is a story of survival, of triumph, and of a beautiful, thriving garden planted in the ashes of their lies.